Hi there, it's Larold. Wrath of the Lich King released earlier this week. The first weekend is almost here, and most people are still leveling, including me. I got to level 72 on the first night, which I think is pretty decent considering I'm an undergeared solo player who had to stop midway through leveling to do a retail sale run with my guild and then spend about an hour or so getting in the queue trying to log back into Wrath servers. Not too shabby. I leveled a lot of characters back in Wrath, and like a senile old man having a moment of clarity, I have definitely felt a lot of the old knowledge I gained back when I played the game the first time pouring back into my brain all at once. I've taken a couple of days and collected a lot of data while leveling in the first couple of zones of Wrath to put some numbers behind those thoughts as well. And the point here isn't to overthink things or cheat myself out of the simple fun of playing Wrath and killing guys. It's just to speed up some of the slower, more repetitive aspects of the leveling process so that I and you can get to max level faster, start gearing up and doing dungeons and raids and all the in-game content more quickly. I don't want to go too in-depth here. I know some guides will try to tell you exactly where to go and what quests to do, and I don't really think that being told exactly what to do all the time makes anyone better at figuring out how to level quickly. And I know for certain that the same route through each zone is not the right approach for every player, every class, every spec, every level of gear, and so on. So maybe you have friends to play with, or you have pretty good gear, and spending more time quickly running through dungeons is a good idea. Maybe, more like me, you're totally solo, kind of undergeared, and you should just focus more on regular questing and grinding mobs out in the world. Either way, here are 5 tips I've come up with to help out in the leveling process. So whether you're watching this the first weekend after Wrath Classic launch and you're racing to level 80 before Nax comes out on October 6th, or you're checking it out in a Wrath Season of Mastery in the year 2028, there should be something here to help make things a little smoother. We'll start with the most important bit. Always be doing something. This is far and away the most important aspect of leveling quickly. No matter what strategy you use, whether you're purely AoE grinding packs of mobs and skipping all quests, or exactly the opposite, pure questing, only doing quest stuff, you should always be doing something. Zones with high levels of player congestion are kind of your worst enemy when it comes to leveling. Standing around spending 2 or 3 minutes waiting for an enemy you have to kill for a quest to respawn, and then missing the tag on it, so now you have to wait another 2 or 3 minutes for that guy to respawn, is extremely painful. Doing that will really slow down your leveling speed. The little quest hubs at the start of Howling Fjord and Borean Tundra are kind of unavoidable roadblocks. But once you get past them, you have a lot more options in terms of where to go and what to do. And if you find yourself in an area that's being flooded with other players, you're probably better off just going somewhere else instead of struggling to compete with them over quests. Just grinding mobs, especially if you can do so with AoE, is a pretty strong XP strategy. It can get a little boring, so doing quests is a good way to break up the monotony, but just quickly killing tons and tons of mobs is the fastest way to level if you can manage it. For most people, doing a mix of a few strategies is the best way to go. Just be sure that you're always doing something. Sitting around waiting for respawns is the worst, and it doesn't really feel fun either, so just don't do it to yourself. These next 2 points really go hand in hand, so I'm going to reiterate both of them here at the same time. Minimize travel time, and don't do every quest. Anytime you're running from one quest to another, you're not completing quests, you're not killing guys, you're not earning XP. I like Dragonblight. It's an iconic zone. It's one of my faves in Northrend, but there are a lot of quests in it that send you on a 2 or 3 minute ride to go do one thing. Then you need to ride back to the quest giver, which again takes 2 or 3 minutes. Then you have to go back to the same place that you just were to do the next quest, and then wait, there's even more going back and forth between points A and B. Really good example of this is in the east side of the zone with the Scarlet Onslaught questline. Tons of quests where you're walking from here, killing one guy, and walking back. If you're able to pick up other quests that are in that area or very close nearby, such as dealing with the ghost soldiers on the coastline over in Dragonblight, or picking up flowers in the Green Dragon Shrine that's just to the west of that Scarlet Onslaught base, if you can do those at the same time that you're running out of town to do the Scarlet Onslaught quests, you can really cut down on a lot of the time you're spending running back and forth between multiple points. This is the approach you should be going with for all questing in every zone, and really at every level, even before you've made it out of Azeroth. It feels really good to open your map and see a quest hub with like a dozen gold question marks indicating quests ready to hand in, and for good reason. You know you're getting a bunch of rewards, but also you know you're cutting down on the amount of time that you're spending running back and forth, not getting any XP or rewards. And on that note, just don't do every quest. Here's an example of a quest I skipped and I didn't regret it at all. Shield Hill is a horde quest in Howling Fjord. You need 5 Vrykul bones, the drop rate is not 100%, and the enemies that drop them respawn a lot less frequently than other non-quest mobs that are patrolling around the same area. I went into that quest area and I fought with other players for spawns, and after about 6 or 7 minutes, I had 2 of the 5 bones that I needed. I was on pace to get 1 quest done in around 10 to 15 minutes, and the reward was 20,000 experience, a pair of Holy Pally shoulders that I wouldn't use, and 5 gold. That's like 80,000 XP per hour. Instead, I left and I went down the hill from there and I AoE farmed shovel tusks for the next 30 minutes. In that time, I farmed about 10 times as much XP as I would have gotten from the quest, along with 50 gold worth of grades and maybe 52 or maybe even 100 gold worth of greens and meat. Much better reward. If you're struggling to get a quest done and it's starting to frustrate you, like that quest was with me, don't let it, just leave it behind. In general, I recommend prioritizing quests that instruct you to kill enemies. Killing groups of enemies is good. You usually don't have to fight too hard to get spawns when it's just kill 12 guys. Killing one special enemy can be really good. It's basically like 20,000 or more XP for just killing a single dude, which is great. But they can be very congested, so be prepared for that possibility and be ready to go do something else while you're waiting for that guy to respawn. Loot quests are a bit more of a mixed bag. Quests where you have to loot items from mobs are usually kind of bad. Drop rates can be low and areas can be very congested because people are having to kill 15, 20, 30 mobs to get their, 10 boar spines or whatever. These are probably the worst kind of quest in WoW. Quests where you have to loot a single item in a specific spot, like walk into a camp and loot a map, those are usually pretty easy and they're pretty great. Quests where you have to loot a bunch of items that have spawned in an area can waste a lot of time too. Looting a bunch of seeds in the Emerald Dragon Shrine, for example, can be a little annoying. If you can do those quests along with other quests to kill enemies in that area, they're alright, but I'm usually not a huge fan. And finally, there's the quest where you have to destroy something or desecrate enemy corpses in some weird way. Interacting with the corpses is usually kill 12 bears type quests, but with an extra step at the end where you then channel a laser gun into the bear corpse. Not great, a little annoying, but not terrible either. Interacting with stuff in the world is usually pretty good. A quest where you have to run into buildings and set them on fire, for example, that's not too bad. You run in, click something, get credit, leave. Only takes a couple of minutes. Not bad. The best possible quests are the ones where you are told to run across the room and talk to someone and given a full quest worth of XP for basically doing nothing. These aren't super common, they're just sort of a nice little bonus, but they're pretty great when you get them. Anytime that you can stack up a batch of quests is usually very good. My favorite, I think everyone's favorite in all of Northrend, is in Sholazar Basin, doing stuff with him at Nessingwary, the whole expedition. You can do pretty much that the whole time, and I think that's why people love that so much. Another example of some quests I took notes on would be the Baleheim Must Burn quest line. It's a group of quests in Howling Fjord. The first 2 quests in it, they're not that great, but there's 4 in total. The first 2 are a kill quest where you have to kill 16 guys who are fairly spread out, and an interact with buildings quest where you just set 4 buildings on fire. I couldn't really pull more than a couple guys together at a time, and I was fighting other people for spawns, so that part went fairly slow. Burning the buildings was easy, that only took like a minute or so. Each quest gave about 15,000 experience each, so not super high. AoE farming shovel tusks at that level was worth about 500,000 XP per hour for me. These quests together took about 10 minutes to complete, so they were under 200,000 XP per hour combined. That's not even a third as effective as just boring AoE grinding. But then the 3rd and 4th quests in this little quest line were worth 25,000 XP each. The third quest was to run down a hill and talk to a guy. It took less than a minute, 1.5 million XP per hour. Pretty nice. The final quest was to insult an elite and kill him. Again, a single enemy kill quest. I got lucky. I did see somebody who was there camping the guy. I just invited him to the group and we killed him together. Again, 25,000 XP for 1 minute's worth of work. That's like 1.5 million XP per hour. Pretty awesome. All total, the whole quest line took around 10 minutes, maybe a little more. It rewarded 80,000 total XP. That's a little under 500,000 per hour, which is not quite as rewarding as AoE farming shovel tusks, but I didn't have to AoE to do it. I didn't have to, be playing any specific spec that can AoE well to do it. And it broke up the monotony of mindlessly killing dudes, which is a nice change of pace. It also gave a couple of decent little quest rewards that I was able to vendor for, I think a combined like 15 or 20 gold, which isn't bad either. And regarding quest rewards, be sure to check them. If you can get a nice gear upgrade from a quest, it's probably worth doing even if it's slow or annoying. That increase in your player power will have a positive effect in the long run, and that's a good thing. Number 4 on the list, and definitely the thing that I've improved the most in since Original Wrath, is using consumables and cooldowns. I bought a bunch of health and mana potions before I headed off to Northrend, and I've been chugging those things like candy. I picked up some basic buff elixirs as well. They're cheap, and the buffs they provide are really strong while leveling. 45 hit rating or expertise rating, 45 defense rating, 200 something health. These are all really good buffs for a very low price, like 50 silver an hour each. That's great. Blizzard had the foresight to give a lot of quests a Northrend supply crate as a bonus reward as well, and those are also filled with food, water, and consumables. If you haven't picked up any elixirs or potions from the auction house, be sure to use some of the rewards from those crates instead. Now as for cooldowns, they don't do anything if you never use them. Using a 5-minute cooldown to kill off just some random mob might feel a little wasteful, but if it lets you pull an extra mob or 2 or 3, that can speed up questing by quite a lot. If you're doing elite quests, then having those cooldowns available is helpful, but just sitting on them while you're cleaving your way through regular guys and waiting until you hit an elite to use your cooldowns is pointless. You should always use them on regular mobs unless you're specifically holding them for some named guy that you're gonna hit in the next minute or so. And finally, when in doubt, just grind some mobs. If you can AoE grind, spending some time AoE grinding packs of enemies is a good move. It's the standard approach to leveling. When I was AoE grinding shovel tusks in Howling Fjord, I was earning around 500,000 XP per hour, which is about on par with the most efficient questing that you can achieve. I also made around 100 gold or so per hour worth of grays and greens and meat, and so on. Some of that'll, the meat in particular will be dependent on what your server's like, but gray is vendor for the same price no matter what server you're on. I later switched to grinding rhinos in Borean Tundra, and they are much more tightly stacked. I was able to pull about 15 of them at a time, so I was getting more like 800,000 XP per hour, maybe more, and, considerably more meat and grays and greens and so on as well. I even managed to get 2 blue BOE drops in the span of like 10 minutes. Then I hit level 72, and the XP they were rewarding started to fall off because they're level 68 and 69 mobs. Every zone has groups of enemies like these that you can pull together in AoE grind, you just have to look around a bit. In general, if you're playing a spec that's capable of AoE grinding at all, I encourage it. Prop Alley's probably the best at it, Frost Mage would be the other main contender, but it's definitely not the only spec that can kill multiple enemies at once. Killing tons and tons of mobs will grant you tons of chances to loot. That means a much higher chance of pulling valuable BOE drops than if you're just straight questing. But it also means that you're going to get a lot more low value stuff like grays and greens, and those still vendor for a decent amount of gold. I've farmed like 2,000 gold already, and I'm only level 73. I started the expansion with, I think, 100 or 200 gold to my name just from quest rewards in Shadow Moon Valley. I bought, I think, 400 gold, 500 gold worth of BOE plate blues and a BOE sword just to help supplement my crappy gear, and I'm still up very good. If I had bothered to level skinning before the expansion started, I would have been able to skin all the beasts I was killing too. While that would have definitely slowed down the XP gains that I was getting, I would have been able to make quite a bit of gold just selling all that leather. Oh well, no big deal. If you're farming humanoids, which probably are the best type of enemy to AoE grind, as long as you can avoid casters because they can be pretty deadly, you will loot gold and cloth. Cloth sells for a lot, especially early on in the expansion, and the demand is very high, and gold is gold. Gold's good. If you don't have much AoE, you can try to focus more on questing, especially doing things like wanted quests and quests that push you toward killing one single enemy. Ideally, you can pick up more gear from quest rewards, get your character a little bit stronger, and then that should help you with cutting through enemies more quickly, which should compensate for grinding them down only one, 2 or 3 at a time. So let's just recap. Basically, grinding down packs of enemies is the fastest way to level, but of course, that's if you can handle it. Dying and having to run back is definitely not good in terms of XP per hour. Doing quests that are tightly stacked up with each other is also really efficient. I didn't really say anything about doing dungeon quests, but if you're able to find groups to run each dungeon in Northrend, once you've picked up the quest for them, that is a really efficient use of time. Spam running dungeons is decent. It's about on the same level as AoE grinding, and it can be fun if you have a good group, but at least trying to do them once just to complete the dungeon quest is a good approach. If you're taking a really long time with a quest that isn't part of an important quest line or doesn't have a good reward, just skip it and move on to another one. Or even just to grinding mobs. Grinding can get boring eventually, so mixing it up between questing and grinding is a good way to keep things fresh, but just keep in mind that you never have to ever do quests or dungeons you don't like in order to level. You don't have to do them at all. You can always just grind it out. Alright, I hope that some or maybe all of these tips will help make the journey to level 80 a little bit quicker and a little more fun for you. I just hit level 73 in my last play session, and that means I'm heading to Grizzly Hills the moment I log back in. I can't wait. I'm gonna set that music volume to 100% as fast as I possibly can. Alright, if you have any questions or suggestions, please leave them in the comments section. It's YouTube, you know what to do. You also know that you have to like and subscribe and blah blah blah. Thanks for watching. Bye.